All right, let's get started. Good morning, first of all. It's a cold morning. Brother Randy, you might have a bunch of extra service calls this week. You don't think? It felt like it. So we'll get started with our prayer list. There's copies on your tables, and I hope they're up to date on everybody. But just to kind of cover a few, we're not going to go over all of them, but if you'd like to look over them, if you see any you want to update or remove or add, we'll do that. First and foremost, our church. Continue to remember our church. Remember Brother Randy this morning as he leads in our worship. I seen this week where we need to definitely be in prayer for Steve and Becky and their situation. I think there's some decisions need to be made, and so we need to just remember that and let the Lord provide the right answer there. Philip, still have you on here, man. Still praying for you. Good to see you this morning. Let's see. Brother Ray Harvey had me add his daughter Megan on here. She's got a kidney stone, but she's having, I think, surgery on the 21st to remove that. Let's see. Gary? Okay. Everything good? Okay. Right. Okay. Greg, you said I have Amber on here. She got a surgery coming up? Okay. Okay. Let's see here. You had a new one this week. You added Liam's teacher and her daughter, her baby. Okay. 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 And that's Kennedy and baby Blakely. Okay. Okay. All right. Also, an addition this morning was Debbie Wilmarth. You want to speak to that? Yeah. Okay. Lori? Okay. I thought I had it on here. Okay. Any others you think of? All right. We'll go into our announcements here. Let's see. Brotherhood this Friday morning, 6:15 down at the ministry building. Let's see. the 25th, which is next Saturday or next Sunday, Brother Tom Hart will return to fill the pulpit. So that's next weekend. The weekend following after that is February 1st, and that's when we're going to have the Central Baptist College singers who will lead in our worship, and then the new president, Jeremy Langley, will bring the message. Miss Margaret's sent this out. She wanted me to read it. It says, we want to show our CBC friends a warm Northview welcome by providing a soup and chili lunch, and then give some things there that's going to be part of that. It says we look forward to having our CBC friends lead us in worship. We trust that Northview will join them for lunch and get to know them. If you're interested in bringing food, contact Sister Margaret Lindsay. That's February the 1st, so a couple weeks away on that. Let's see. I don't know of any other announcements. Do anybody have any other announcements? Okay. All right, well, we'll go ahead and put that on our other request for DVS right now. Never too early. All right, anybody got any others or any other announcements? Good. Well, that's praise. Right. All right. We'll open in prayer. Joe, you want to open us, please? Amen. All right, so this morning we're going to be in chapter 6 of the book of Luke. We've been going through Luke. This whole quarterly is in Luke. And I like it this way because it slows way down and it doesn't cover so much at one time. Not 3 chapters at a time, I like it like this. So to kind of set the stage for this week's lesson. So after Jesus was baptized, we had that a few weeks ago, we talked about that. Over the next year, he had been ministering mainly in the region of Judea. This is his early ministry. And during that time, which is not recorded in the book of Luke, it is in John, a lot of things took place. So a couple things was, well, he started calling his disciples, and he also had started, or he had visited Jerusalem at the time, cleansed the temple, first time, witnessed to Nicodemus. We know that story, right? That took place during this first year. And also the woman at the well experience. That was during the first year. That was actually his travel where he's headed now, back to Samaria. So if you ever look at a map, because it's hard for me to put this in my mind if I don't know where these places are. So I have maps at my house, like a whole book of them. So we're going to talk about the region he's in today in Galilee. So Galilee is the far northern region of Israel. And below that is Samaria, which is another large area. And below that is Judea, back at this time. So he had spent most of his time down south. Now he's going back to Galilee to ministry. And during that time, he through his teaching and witnessing all the stories we've read, he had gained a multitude of followers. Like he's getting a lot of people starting to follow him. He's getting a lot of attention from people who actually are interested, but also people who are out to get him at the time, from the religious leaders. And he knew that. So at the right time, he decided to make that trip to Galilee. Galilee, yes. So Galilee. So in Galilee, that's where he spent the most time in his ministry. Over a year and a half was in Galilee. So the majority of the time was in that area. Over the next year and a half, we talked about being located up north. It was a very diverse region, meaning mixture of Jews, Gentiles, both. It was a very populated region at the time because of the commerce, trade routes, and all the things going on. It was a place where Jesus was able to reach and minister to all kinds of people in that area, which is why he went up there. Because these people in that area at that time were different backgrounds, different beliefs, and all that. So kind of to set the stage there. But in today's lesson, we're going to see one of the stories, a very special event that took place during that time, where he chooses his 12 apostles from among his followers. You know, we sometimes think of Jesus only having 12 disciples. That's it, right? We talk about the 12. Jesus is 12. Well, Jesus had way more than 12 disciples. These are referred to because they're mentioned the most, but he had a lot more than 12 because he was discipling people along the way. You remember the story, just a few chapters after this one, where he sent out people to go minister in areas, and he mentioned 70 people. So we know he at least had 70. You know, he was sending them out in pairs and all that. So, but we just think of 12. But the 12 we think of, and we'll see their names, that Jesus was discipling along the way. They were also appointed as apostles. That would be their official name, would be the apostles. And there's a big difference between an apostle and a disciple. Okay? So in the New Testament, the word disciple that's used here, it means follower or learner or kind of like a apprenticed, I guess. A lot of different words there. But the word apostle here actually means a chosen messenger for a specific mission. That's what that word means. That's what apostle means. So he's going to choose 12 apostles today. So let's look at our first group of verses in chapter 6, verses 12 through 16. It says, "And it came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray, and continued all night in prayer to God. And when it was day, he called unto him his disciples. And of them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles." Goes down the list here, gives us who they are. Simon, who was also named Peter, and Andrew, his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon called Zealots, and Judas the brother of James, and Judas Iscariot, which also was the traitor. Throughout Jesus' ministry, other than his death, burial, resurrection, Brother Randy, this event might have been one of the biggest events that took place, or the most significant event that took place. And I say that because this decision he had to make was a huge turning point in his ministry up to that time. And what made it so significant is the fact that the future of the church was riding on it. So it was depending on it, because that was his plan from the beginning. The continuation of Jesus' ministry and the spread of the gospel message to the whole world was relying on these people. Right? Big decision, I would say. Would you agree?
He already knew where each one of these men were going to go.
Yeah.
They didn't know where they were going to go.
Yeah.
So after they'd been crucified and had ascended into heaven, until that moment they gathered together and separated again on their way.
Right.
He already knew where they were going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jesus was about to choose 12 men, okay, that would be commissioned to advance his plan for his church, right? He's about to choose them. And I can't even begin to comprehend how to express how impactful that decision was, like we talked about. Because it was a big decision. And most of the time we just kind of overlook stuff like that. We don't really think about it. We just say, well, he was God, in the flesh, and he kind of knew, and he did, like you said, he knew, but then again, he was still human, right? He was in human form, in the flesh. And yes, he was God in the flesh. But there was often times where he did not play God in human, right? We see that. So it's not that he was just playing a game, right? He was fully human too. He had emotions, he had feelings, he had all these things that we have. And Paul said to the Philippians that was arguing this same thing. He said, Jesus made himself of no reputation, taking on the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men. And as a man, the Bible says he came to serve us, right? And that service was to be an example to us, an example we can follow. I think I mentioned it a few weeks ago. The best way I know how to explain it is he didn't, like I say, play God all the time in the flesh. He voluntarily often divested himself of the use of his attributes, right? In order to identify with us. We talked about that. And I make that point because of what it says in verse 12. Before Jesus made this decision that would affect then on, still today, the first thing he did was to go to his Father. Now, if Jesus had to pray about a decision, and he did often throughout Scripture, you can see it, where he would go away, spend time alone, to pray about this decision. This is his human side, right? He had to know what the will of God was for this decision. So he had to go to the Father. That's the first thing he did. But notice also he went out by himself to be alone, right? Quiet place. No distractions. But also notice he prayed all night. He said all night. That's a long time, Joe. All night. And that's what it means, all night. That's literally what it means. He prayed for his Father's guidance in selecting these 12 men all night long. And I'm assuming that he was praying for who they were and praying for them and there was to come for them, right? In his own ministry. But I thought about that, and I just realized, I probably don't pray near as much as I should about the things I should. You know what I'm saying? I mean, when you think about that all night long, praying for these men, and he went to the Father for the answer, right? He could have chose some. He's been discipling them along the way. I remember whenever I was probably, I don't know, 12, 14, 15 maybe, back home in my church on Sunday nights, we would have what we call a prayer service night. So people would get in their groups and they would pray the whole service. That was the service. You pray the whole time, 30 minutes. And what we would do, we would get in a group and we would take turns and everybody would pray in the circle. If you didn't want to pray, you could pass it on. But we would just keep going the whole time. And I thought about that in this lesson. I don't think we take advantage of the privilege of prayer in our life and the impact it has and the importance it is. So let's look at these 12 he talked about. So it gives us the names. We all are familiar with the names. They're known as the 12. Peter, James, and John. It mentions the very first group there. And these were fishermen. These guys were fishermen by trade. Peter was probably the leader of the little group there. They all fished together. Peter was, as we know, a very outspoken person. He talked too much sometimes. He was just that kind of person. It got him in trouble. Andrew was Peter's brother, who was also a fisherman. James and John were also brothers. They were the sons of Zebedee. You've heard that name before. Zebedee was actually I guess you could call that the fishing company that they worked for, was Zebedee. Yeah. But something interesting about James and John is they had a nickname, and their nicknames were Sons of Thunder. Y'all remember that story? The Sons of Thunder? At one time, they got so frustrated they were considering calling down fire from heaven onto a village of Samaritans because they weren't listening to them. They were rejecting them. They just, God, why don't you just strike them down? So that's where they got that name. Also, Philip and Bartholomew. Another name for Bartholomew would be Nathaniel. Jesus called Philip to follow him about the same time he called the first four. And Philip actually took part in calling Bartholomew. He invited him to come to Jesus, to follow Jesus. Then it goes to Matthew and Thomas. Matthew was a tax collector. We know that. He was a Jew that worked for the Roman government. That's what he did for a living. He was a traitor among his people. He wouldn't have many friends, many Jewish friends. They would have despised him because he had turned his back on his people. Thomas was known as a doubter. We know that. After Jesus' resurrection, he was one who said, I got to see it to believe. Right? James, the son of Alphaeus. Don't know much about this James. He could have been related to Matthew because he's also, in one of the verses, referred to as the son of Alphaeus. So, but also Simon the Zealot. Y'all know what a zealot was? Anybody know what a zealot was? Yeah, the zealots were a big deal. Before Simon was called to Jesus, he was a member of the zealots. And the zealots were a group of revolutionists. They were a militia group of fighters and assassins, and their target was the Roman leaders and politics, because of what they were doing to their people. Simon was a zealot. And then we get to Judas, this brother of James, who's also known as Thaddeus. We've heard that name before. And then Judas, the traitor. So you go from fishermen, tax collectors, zealots, traitors. I mean, what a crew, right? No. No, I know he was from a place called like Zeroth, and the original name for that had something to do with being a traitor. So it kind of tied back to his whatever. But anyway, think about that crew, right? Not ideal to be the future of the church, to start Jesus' vision of the church. But these were all Galilean men. They were considered low class, middle class at best. They were not educated, all different backgrounds, even different beliefs. That we may know why he prayed all night, Greg. But that tells us something, though. There's something we can take from that, is that the Lord can call anybody at any time, all kinds of people, to serve in His kingdom. So we should never think that God can't use us in ministry at any time. Despite what we think, our failures, whatever, our past, God chooses to use ordinary people to do some extraordinary things at times, as we can see here. He's done that from the beginning of Scripture, and He's still doing it today. That's how God works. Now, before we move on, I thought you were supposed to say something, Miss Debbie, about it, but there's always two questions that pop up, right, when those Scriptures are read. There's always two. I saw it all week in stuff. So the first, why 12, first of all? Why was 12? Well, 12 was, Israel had originally 12 tribes, right? In the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, 12 tribes. And Jesus is reforming that nation through these 12. He's reforming it under the New Covenant, right? And fulfilling His plan, starting with the Jews, starting with the tribes, right? First Jew, the Christians were the first Jews because the gospel came to the Jew first, then to the Gentiles. And from there, through the leaders, the gospel was spread. And through, especially the Apostle Paul, who was the apostle to the Gentiles. So that's usually the first question, why 12? And the other question is, why Judas? Why Judas Iscariot? We talked about, well, he knew. Well, why Judas? No, this is Judas Iscariot, the one who was a traitor. So why Judas? Yeah, the Sunday school writer didn't talk about it either. Didn't many people talk about it in some of the commentary. But I want to talk about it. I like these kind of conversations. It usually doesn't get talked about. So why choose Judas when they knew how it was going to end up? Well, I thought a lot about that this week, and I kind of come to a conclusion. It is what it is. First of all, there's a lot of things we don't understand about the way God works, so we have to realize that first. But that's why that's why we have to live by faith, not by facts. When Jesus chose Judas to be an apostle, He fully intended for Judas to fulfill that mission. He fully intended for Judas to fulfill that calling at that time, all the way up to the very end. He wanted Judas to fulfill that calling, or else He wouldn't have called him. But we know he failed, right? But the reason why he failed was not because he didn't get everything all the other apostles got, the same discipleship, the same teaching, all that. It wasn't that he was left out of any of that, any different from the others. It was because he never made Jesus his Lord. That's why. And you don't see that until the very last day. This is what I'm talking about. At the Last Supper, the last supper, the night Jesus was arrested, Jesus told all 12 disciples that night that one of you is going to betray me. That's when He told them. And they were shocked. They were shocked. And each of them, if you read that, each of them asked, he said, this is their question, and the words are important. They said, Jesus, or they said, Lord, is it me? Lord, is it me? They were wondering, who is it? Is it me? Lord, is it me? And then He gets to Judas. And Judas' response was, is it me, Rabbi? Did you see that? Rabbi. The 11 disciples called Jesus Lord. And he was their Lord. They had put their faith in him as Lord. Judas never made him Lord. To Judas, Jesus was just Rabbi. He was just a teacher. He was just the good teacher. That's what they call it. That's what Rabbi means, teacher. Think about that. Judas walked with Jesus for a long time. I don't know how long, over 2 years. Walked with him every day. Traveled with him. Judas went to church with Jesus, didn't he? Judas learned from Jesus. Judas was discipled by Jesus. He was taught. And here's a big one. Judas believed Jesus. Right? He believed him. I mean, he was following. I wouldn't doubt Judas didn't believe every word Jesus said. But Judas never put his faith in Jesus. That's the difference. He never put his faith in him. He never made him Lord. He never trusted him and made him Lord. So the point here is, regardless of how much you know or how much you go to church or how much you read your Bible or even how much you believe who Jesus is. In James 2 it says, you believe in one God, that's good. Even the demons believe. The demons believe. Yeah. Yeah. So Judas never made him Lord. So that's a big difference. If he's not Lord, that's all that matters. Never trusted him as his Lord. Simply believing, the demons believe. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. And then, and I was making that point for people today. We have His Word, we have the Spirit, us to believe, and then there's the crowd that is probably more like Judas. They assume things, but they've never made Him Lord. So that's the number one question: is He Lord of your life? Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, Judas never done that. All right, next group of verses. We'll look at these real quick. It's the verses 20 through 23. The blessings. It says, and he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, blessed be ye poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye that hunger now, for ye shall be filled. Blessed ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. Blessed ye when men shall hate you, and when you shall separate you, and when they shall separate you from their enemy, and shall reproach you, and cast out your name as evil, for the Son of Man's sake. Rejoice in that day, and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. For in the like manner did their fathers unto the prophets. After Jesus had called his 12, you notice there's some verses in between the last group of verses and this one. He began to teach them about what true happiness is all about as a believer. These verses are similar to the ones in Matthew chapter 5 through 7, which is known as the Sermon on the Mount. Luke only records a shorter version of this. He only has a few verses in there. Or it could be a different one altogether, Brother Randy. I don't know. It could be a different sermon altogether. I wouldn't say it would be wrong. Jesus could say the same thing multiple places, right? Preaching and all that. So who knows? It didn't matter. Either way, these parallel the same scriptures in Matthew. So Jesus begins with what is known as the Beatitudes. Right? That's what these verses are called, the Beatitudes. And the Beatitudes are Jesus' teaching on what it means to be truly blessed. Right? It's a description of what it means to experience a life of blessings. What true happiness looks like for those who put their faith in Christ. I'm going to try to explain it the best way I can. But when we read those verses, we quickly realize that Jesus' teaching on happiness and man's view are totally different. Right? That's what you see. And the reason for that is we tend to view happiness as people, we tend to view it from a worldly perspective. I mean, that's we're living in a world, right? From the worldly perspective. And that results in happiness being determined on our circumstances. Right? Happiness for us is built on circumstances. Circumstances are how it's measured. Am I right? It's how it's measured. By the things happening around us and to us. That's circumstances. But Jesus is teaching the opposite. This is what he's teaching. He's teaching us that true happiness or joy, would be a better word, is not based on circumstances for the believer. It's not based on what's happening on the outside. It's based on what's happening on the inside. That's where it comes from. And that's how it should be measured. So imagine how they must have felt when he's talking to a bunch of Jews and his new apostles now, and he's talking to us today too, by the way, in this sermon. When they heard this about being happy and how Jesus describes being blessed, just the opposite of what they expected. He mentioned the first one, blessed are the poor. He's meaning poor in spirit. He's not meaning actually poor. But he's using that because that's something they can relate to. Right? So he said, blessed are the poor. In Matthew 5, it does say poor in spirit. And that is realizing you're spiritual bankrupt. Right? You're poor. And reaching out to God for salvation. That person is blessed because of, and they're a part of God's kingdom when they do that. That's a blessed person. That's a blessed life. That's experiencing real blessings in life. He goes on, he says, bless ye that hunger, meaning those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness. That's what he's teaching these people. The one who is passionate about growing in their relationship. That's a hungry person, spiritually speaking, with God. He promises that person will be filled. Blessed are ye that weep now. He's talking about those that they mourn over their sin in life. They take their sin seriously. It says they will have their sorrows replaced with joy. The last one, it says, bless ye when men shall hate you, and when they shall separate you from their company, and shall reproach you, and cast out your name as evil, for the Son of Man's sake. That's referring to being persecuted as a Christian, which his disciples or apostles were going to definitely experience. They all were persecuted for their faith. He says that person will be blessed and will receive a reward in heaven that is greater than they can ever imagine. These beatitudes or blessings that Jesus is talking about here in these verses are expressions of the life of a believer and follower of Jesus. He's wanting them to understand that. These people were thinking the complete opposite. From the Old Testament, all the old stuff. Jesus is saying, no, these are the blessed people. These blessings or beatitudes are my expressions of divine favor or eternal value that will come to those who put their trust in me. That true happiness isn't determined by your circumstances, by what's going on around you. It's determined by your relationship with Jesus. That's what he's teaching. We're about out of time. Did anybody have anything they wanted to talk about? Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else? Anything they want to share, talk about? Sorry I didn't get to the last part there. Brother Randy, there's a lot in these verses, and it's hard to not talk about some stuff. But anyway, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Right. Hmm. Hmm. Right. Yeah. No, no, it's not saying you have. It just, yeah. How much time do you dedicate to that? Yeah. 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 Anybody got anything else before we dismiss? Remember Brother Randy this morning as he brings our message uh, in our church moving forward with all the things we got going on. Um, Speaking of prayer, we need to be in prayer for our church, um, for God's guidance and direction and all that. Got a lot of things working. So, anyway, we'll dismiss. Seth, you mind dismissing us?